play the music and then improvise a bit, and then we can go on the text. In the absurdist mysticism. So there's a clean line actually. So you can also repeat some stuff just in case.
Okay, I got it. So, we are online, but we'll wait for 2 minutes till the audience would come. So, several aspects. I need to share the link to test the presentation. Not the presentation, but the translation, if everything's fine. Yeah, we are online. We're online. Okay. We haven't dropped yet. It's fine. So.
And what do you say, translation?
Again.
What did you say about the translation?
No. I mean, yeah, translation like трансляция. Yeah, that's it. But I mean stream. I mean stream. Yeah, it's like Russian roots are always with me, so disturbing me, sort of.
Very common for our philosophers to say, translate.
Yeah,
also makes sense, right?
So let me do this. Share some links on different nets, actually. So let me do this even here. Yeah, here. Wait, no, not this exactly. Another one. Yeah, the link is fine. Oh, hello Thomas. I'll be talking to the chat sometimes. So if I'm talking, to somebody in a room, that's the chat, actually.
I can imagine. Hello, Thomas.
yeah, that is. Oh, hello, Jellycock. Hello. These are nicknames, by the way. So I'm pronouncing not something bad in a Russian slang sort of stuff. No. I'm just pronouncing names. That are okay for the internet. So yeah, happy to see you guys. I'll guess we'll wait just for a minute, and then I'll start the regular thing like, hello, we're here for the announcement, actually. Yeah. So, several moments. Hello. Hello, Gary. Hello, Sergey. We're waiting for a bit, and we're ready to go live, metaphorically speaking.
What do you say, metaphorically speaking? To go.
What again?
Ready to go, metaphorically speaking.
Yeah.
Okay, we're not walking here. We are online.
Yeah, that is. But there are some layers even within the online. Like we are online, but we'll go live in a certain density of meaning, of recovering and refreshing the tense. The tense of our onlineness, I'd say. So it's okay. By the way, there is the first question for you. if you want, you can answer it to it now. Hannes, what are your future plans?
No plans, no plans.
Okay. Metaphorically speaking, I suppose.
No, I'd say that to give a more philosophical answer, the future is indeterminate. There's nothing we can know about it. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. If even it's going to happen, who knows? Even that.
Yeah, it's related to the topic we'll discuss today. So yeah, I guess several moments and we'll start. So yeah, I guess we can start now. Hello everyone. Hello everybody. Happy to be here. Actually, as you know, probably, or if you don't know, I'll announce ourselves and our inner beings in front of you. You are being on a counterculture philosophy channel where we are expressing new ideas, discovering new concepts, just from extracting our inner beings. So today we're having my favorite section. By the way, I'm Chiron theorist, I'd say the regular front person of this club, of this place actually. And we're having my favorite section here, individual lecture, or in Russian it's Сольное высказывание, where philosophers present their own ideas, their own unique studies. And today we are really happy to hear Hannes Schumacher, mysterious and impressive philosopher who studies lots of weird and therefore great stuff. And we are going to discuss the encounter the weird. It's an open talk on absurdism, as Hannes stated it, and it's even impressive within the title. So the structure is usual. First of all, we are going to have to listen to Hannes, to his ideas, to his explorations, and then we'll go to the discussion section where you can just state your questions, and we'll try to answer them actually, and then just have a talk, with Hannes. I mean, I would talk to Hannes. That's the favorite part. Yeah, so you can start. I'll turn my microphone off so you can be more clear to the audience.
Okay. Well, just a word on our own encounter. We two just met a couple of days ago in Tokyo at the conference in Tokyo, and now 1 week later we're meeting again in Moscow. And I've never been to Russia, so I'm happy about this. Thank you. And I have the feeling that this is already a very strange encounter. Somehow the online world gives us some very weird kind of encounters. And I'd like to start with some music. I'm going to share this.
It's downloading.
Now it's coming in?
I do not see anything, besides some green squares. But you can try to start the music and it could be okay. Probably it will be okay.
Hear it?
Yeah.
So this is something pretty weird for me. For me, this voice is kind of a mountain goddess, and I have a pretty sensual relationship with her. She's also a plant in a sense, and I'm to hurt her hands. And she's also very dangerous. And when I look at the mountains, she somehow looks with me. She's somehow beside me. And she also steals my breath because she's also looking from the mountains at me. It's like we share the same body, and this body is also in the mountains at the same time. And this is a very weird and mystical kind of experience I have almost every day. Now I'm going to stop sharing the streaming.
Mm-hmm.
I can see you, but very small. Okay.
You can, just tap on me and I'll get bigger. Probably that works this way. Metaphorically speaking, for sure.
Sorry?
Just a bad joke, like metaphorically speaking, and not only metaphorically.
Metaphorically speaking, and how much metaphorical is what I say? I'm not sure. I don't know if you could hear it well. It's in a DJ set. The voice saying it's actually a quote from Oscar Wilde, but it's brought in a wholly different context. And I think what I do with it is bringing it again in an extremely different context. So what is actually said in the quote is, beauty is a form of genius, is higher indeed than genius, as it needs no explanation. It is of the great facts of the world, like sunlight or springtime, or the reflection in dark waters of that silver shell we call the moon. It cannot be questioned. It has its divine right of sovereignty. And since I had a pretty weird and mystical experience with this about a year ago, I've been starting to put this kind of thinking and poetic mysticism into my philosophy, so to say. So this experience I had, I would say nowadays, actually brought me to a wholly new understanding concerning contemporary philosophy, such as especially the philosophy of Conte who works with a very formal way of argumentation. It's almost a mathematical argumentation, like very similar to Spinoza. In sense, then, since the voice, so to say, said, it cannot be questioned, it has its divine right of sovereignty, I don't see this point anymore of proving the divine. Somehow it has to go the other way around. Somehow this understanding of the divine emanates toward us, and trying to prove it would always basically limit it. And the quote goes on, "To me, beauty is the wonder of wonders. It is only shallow people who do not judge by appearances. The true mystery of the world is the visible, not the invisible." And this last sentence for me is actually the most important, and will also be part of the text I'm going to work through afterwards. The true mystery of the world is the visible, not the invisible. It's not something. The divine is not something somewhere hidden in a Hinterwelt or something, and we're trying to find out what it is. Actually, there's no essence behind, but the mystery lies in the visible itself. And this is also an issue I've been exploring the last weeks, actually working on Deleuze's understanding of expression in Spinoza in relation to Hegel. And as we said in personal conversations, all these names, they're so much corrupting the original thought. But maybe for you it will be helpful to kind of start understanding from what most of thoughts I'm starting with. So the idea is that the visible, everything visible is actually manifestation of God, but this God, as we will see, I rather understand as a form of chaos. Now, since we are here in a counterculture section, before going deeper into it, I actually want to ask the general question. What we can discuss later is what is actually contemporary counterculture? I mean, counterculture is a concept that is all the time, again and again, related to the 1960s. And nowadays there's a lot of skepticism about it, or cynicism of all these hippies, and it's really ridiculous. We cannot really do something nowadays. I have the feeling everything gets always ridiculed, and the only thing we can actually do is becoming more and more intellectual and doing all our PhDs and just adopting to the system. So I'm interested in maybe there's also going on more in Moscow. In Germany, where I grew up and studied a lot, I always had the feeling there's nothing at all happening. In Greece, there's more movement going on, and in Greece, I was also working with an artistic collective, and we had our own art space, and there was a lot more happening. And I wonder if where usually you do this kind of events. And I was thinking that we also have a couple of advantages compared to the 1960s. One is certainly the internet, and this is a thing we are experiencing at the moment. The point that we can go really international. I mean, as I always say, I cannot really stand the English language. It's this colonial language. It's very imprecise. I don't find it very philosophical, but at least it's a way we can communicate. And I would also criticize myself, the counterculture of the 1960s, for being not seriously cross-cultural. And this is also a thing which is reflected much in nowadays philosophy. If you compare it to the perennial philosophy of Huxley back in the days, it's a nice book, but it's very syncretic. Then comes in the New Age, and the New Age, I always have the feeling it somehow takes Asian thought actually and transforms it into kind of a spirituality, which is then again only celebrated in the West. So there's not really an encounter happening. It's more an assimilation. But now I would like to go in the direction and tell you what I find actually important in all understanding of counterculture. What makes sense for back then and also for nowadays is for me that it's always an encounter with the weird. Not the weird. The weird is weird because it's not normal, right? But this is already kind of a contradiction, because the normal then is defined through the weird, and the weird is only defined through what is normal. So especially when we're mixing up cultural contexts, it's always possible that what I find really weird, maybe you find very normal, and also the other way around. But I think this is not so important. The main thing is to really encounter what we self find weird, to deal with it, and to also start celebrating it. And I think with this procedure, it doesn't really matter what else is going on. For me, this is, for example, the answer for the question, what is art actually doing, especially art which is not precisely political art. It's still doing something even on a political level, I think, because it estranges us. It gives us the possibility, the opportunity to open ourselves to the strange and to the weird, and actually to look behind this so-called normality. And in a way, I've also found out that in philosophy, I've never been really interested in so-called truth. Actually, I was always interested in the trippy, in the whatever makes my mind explode. And now I'm thinking further. Actually, this must be truth. Actually, whatever is always concerned, whatever is always understood as normal, is always exactly what is just given from our cultural context, or from our context just to be human. That's already a very limiting kind of context. So in a way, as soon as we encounter the weird, we already go outside of the transcendental realm, as we say in Kantianism, or out of the transcendental field. We actually have a real encounter. The encounter with the weird is the only real encounter, and this again may be reflected further in contemporary philosophy, which is more mathematical, with more argumentation. And I think it's very interesting to have this more experimental approach to it. I also figured out, I mean, sometimes they also like the English language, right? The term encounter has also the term counter inside itself, right? So I thought about the counterculture in relation to the encounter, and in relation to the counterculture of the 60s. Today we would maybe say, well, there's nothing counter really anymore. If you go with contemporary political philosophy like Negri, for example, there's always the issue that there's not really, you cannot really be opposed to empire. You always belong to it. The only thing you can do is kind of being different to it, right? You're inside the system, and you're roughly differing from it. It's more like a guerrilla. It's not a war anymore. We're not having a war. We're having a guerrilla. Everything is occupied anyways, and we just have to explode these limitations. And this is, in a sense, then really not a counterculture, but a culture of encounter, right? The N, in the sense, comes from the Latin, and it actually means in. So when you encounter the weird, it's not only this superficial encounter, as we say, it's kind of a meeting, they're staying distant and respect each other and tolerate each other, what is also a favorite term of mainstream culture, tolerance. No, the point is that we enter it, we encounter the weird. So the weird, what we call the weird, is actually a gateway to something which in the end we wouldn't call weird anymore. Oh, Agamben, for example, all the time likes to talk about the state of exception, and of course I agree. There's always the laws are considered as the normal, and the exception, the outlaw, is the weird, so to say. But actually, we have to turn this whole thinking around. So to say that the weird, what we now call weird, is beyond all this human fuss. It's actually the weird is actually the normal, right? The more natural, for sure. And having said this, I'd like to have a look in my text I've written a couple of weeks ago for a more mainstream kind of conference on atheism, and here the question was how to understand atheism on a global scale, which goes beyond the European, actually. And I'll share my screen again. If I find the PDF. The PDF is open, but I can't see it.
Yeah, demonstrate the screen and it will be fine. Just, try again. It always works.
Here it is. It's just so small I didn't see it. Okay.
I got it. It is. That is stream.
Coming.
Okay. Yeah, it's downloading. Yeah, we can see it. Nice.
Yeah. Okay, and you can also see it big, right? Okay, the paper is called 39 Theses on Absurdist Mysticism, and absurdist mysticism is sort of way to really understand this idea of mysticism I have in a radical way, which can be understood also in terms of future religiosity, which really has not much in common with what you usually call religion. I did switch on the light here, it's a bit dark. So let's see how it goes with time. I'll try to finish in half an hour so we have enough discussion. I don't know if anyone had the chance to have a short look at the
I
paper.
opened the file so people can see it.
You don't see it in my screen sharing at the moment.
No, I see it. So
Oh,
it's okay. It's fine.
Yeah.
Dear viewers, write in the chat if you're ready to continue the discussion, the listening process actually. So yeah, we're waiting for you.
Okay. As you see, I mean, the paper is composed of two parts. The first is called argumentations, So you see, I'm partly against arguments, but of course there's also sometimes the need for them to point out, to make a point, right?
The viewers say that it's okay, you can go on. Yeah, it's visible. The reasons, the parts, so you can continue your speech.
Okay, cool. So I will just maybe go through the argumentations and comment a bit on it, so that you can start linking it also with what I said before. So first part is first numbers, as I said. If we are to conceptualize the notions of atheism and unbelief on a scale of global philosophy, the apparent dichotomy of atheism and religion seems wholly obsolete. And the second point starts explaining why. While the heterodox traditions such as Buddhism and Taoism may be claimed as atheist religions, European atheism is not radical enough as to truly affirm the death of God. The name of God is merely replaced by a whole series of new names such as reason and morality, equality and justice. And another point will go later deeper into this. Our point 3 is, at the same time, even Orthodox religions have their mystical traditions, which paradoxically bear great similarities with the most radical forms of atheism. And this will be my main point, that we can understand the mystical traditions very much in relation to so-called absurdism, which goes more in the direction of Beckett or Camus. We have to clearly separate these notions and push them to the extremes as to establish a more profound understanding of unbelief that is able to explain the dynamic entanglement of atheism and religion. And I tend to write the word unbelief with brackets around the un to make sure that it's neither unbelief nor belief, or it's at the same time both, because it's always an entanglement between them. In number 5, we go deeper into the question of more radical atheism. Following the most radical atheists, such as Nietzsche, Stirner, Jordan, so-called atheism in mainstream culture and society is only a perpetuation of Christian ideals in the guise of disbelief. From the celebration of an abstract humanity in Feuerbach and the ideology of equality in Marxism, to the proclamation of human rights in the agenda of the United Nations, they identify a hidden metaphysics that is only atheist if seen from a superficial stance. So I would even call Marx, in a way, it's also a sort of Christian, you could say. So number 6, as to truly understand the death of God, it is not enough to only wipe out the obsolete existence of God. The death of God is an event that manifests itself on all levels of culture and society, such as the absolute lack of a true essence, reason, morality, and meaning of life. So the question of existence of God is not enough to really understand the whole point of the death of God. I really think we have to dig much deeper into it to find out what is the actual issue. Now, this radically absurdist worldview is famously expressed in the literature of Beckett and Camus, but interestingly, it may be found as well in the skeptical dialectics of Nagarjuna, the founder of Mahayana Buddhism. So there are also a lot of links to Buddhist philosophy, which is also very much neglected in Western academia in general. Number 8, mystical traditions such as the Kabbalah in Judaism, Sufism and Islam, and so on, differentiate between the official meanings of the sacred scriptures and the mystical meaning. Meister Eckhart, for example, differentiates between a personal, transcendent God and impersonal, immanent Godhead that is a silent desert and goes even beyond God. So we always have this difference between God and the Godhead, and obviously I'm interested in the Godhead. And the problem is that in the mystical traditions, these two truths are mostly blurred, because the mystics are so excited about their experiences that they always say, yes, this was God, and then again, this was the Godhead. So you tend to blur them together. But we have to clearly separate between these two as to develop a precise notion of mysticism, and also oppose it to another term I use, which is orthodoxy, which is this is sometimes a bit confusing for those in a cultural context with the Christian orthodoxy, like in Russia or in Greece, where I am at the moment. The term orthodoxy in this cultural terminology is something like Protestant Christianity and Catholic Christianity and Orthodox Christianity. But I don't understand it in this way. I understand it as much more general, dogmatic kind of thinking, which understands religion mainly as a kind of law that we have to follow. And I oppose this to mysticism, which in my understanding goes really much against it, and goes in the direction of life, chaos, and love. Now, such separation between these two notions of God, right, goes in line with the negative theology that dialectically negates all positive notions of the absolute. We now see that this procedure is not very different to the skepticism of radical atheism. So the negative theology is also actually a classical tradition within theology. And in a way I understand atheism only as the most extreme version of negative theology. So negative theology always tries to, they say God is so absolute, we cannot give all this human predicates to God. Now in atheism we go one step further. We cannot even give this predicate to God, that God exists. So I really understand the existence of God also as a sort of predicate. But this again is not atheism in the standard sense. Oh well, there's no God and that's it, right? It goes philosophically, it goes much deeper. We're getting to the close of the argumentations. Number 11. This way, absurdism may be understood as a branch of mysticism itself that undermines both Christian and atheist orthodoxy. The result of this radical skepticism, however, is not nothingness, but a creative chaos. Absurdism, in this sense, is not the nihilism, but the radical affirmation of the absurd and mystical. And now we're getting to the main conclusions. Number 12. Think. God is even greater if he does not exist, if he is not himself a being. The true difference doesn't lie between atheism and religion, but between orthodoxy and mysticism. In March, I think I'm going to give a talk at the conference on atheism in Iran, in which I'm going to present a paper which argues for divine inexistence, and this will be very spicy, I suppose, because it always has a very heretic character, so to say.
Okay.
But I will also be trying to convince people that, the category of heresy is anyways quite absurd, I think, but also to convince people that this is not the standard notion of atheism. Actually, I would say that people who are not atheists simply have a very, very small vision of God. And the final one is to say the absurd is the mystical is the absurd, such is the sublime strangeness of God. And this sublime strangeness of
sorry
God.
for interruption, there is a question, just it would be convenient to ask it just right now. Could you please elaborate on the 12th thesis? Yeah, there is
Yeah, sure.
question.
I mean, in general, you can also interrupt me. We're having an open talk, so I will also try to have enough time for talking in the end, about an hour. But you can also ask me in between. It's good.
Okay. But I'll try
Elaborate
not
on
to,
it, yeah.
just for, leaving this space just for you. So, but there is a question that would be convenient to be asked just right now. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's for everyone. If everyone has questions, just ask them in the chat, and I'll try to answer them immediately. So to elaborate, let's read it again. Think, God is even greater if he does not exist, if he is not himself a being. The true difference doesn't lie between atheism and religion, but between orthodoxy and mysticism. So I guess the question is very much related to the first part. God is even greater if he does not exist, if he is not himself a being. Yes, I think that's a very interesting point, which somehow for me came very much through intuition. But since many people are asking me about this, I really decided also to elaborate on this and write a big paper on it. It's about 12 pages, I think. I'm arguing with more contemporary ontology, you could say, with philosophers like Gilles Deleuze and Heidegger, and also with Nishida from Japan. And in all these three thinkers, I see a tendency to understand being, this is to say the beings, with a small b in Heidegger, das Seiende, as in a way inferior to, in Heidegger, to a being with a capital B, das Sein, which is equated to nothing, as inferior to difference, as in Deleuze, and also in Nishida especially, being is extremely inferior to a so-called absolute nothing. So there's a turn happening, which is it's trying to deal with the question how we can have a more and more immanent understanding of the world and expression and of God or chaos or being and so on. And we're starting, I think, nowadays to really turn the hierarchy around, but not in terms of classical atheism, simply cut out God, for example. I think the main point here is to really, you can go in this direction and think about the potential in God related to the being in the world, right? In the classical medieval European view, and also in the Arabic theology, there's always this extreme hierarchy from God, and then going down, all the creatures, right? So God is always understood as existing necessarily, or existing in a way more, some of the levels of being. And I think the new understanding is to turn this around, because it's problematic to say that God is more, and at the same time has more possibility, more potency. This is an extreme hierarchy. What makes more sense is to say that since God has all the possibilities, so really everything can happen. This is also the main point, I think, of counterculture, that everything can happen. This is the absolute potential of possibility. This must be on the level of the virtual God. At the same time, on the level of being, there's not much happening there, right? Things are. They are the lighter it is, you can do something with it, but the more rigid it gets, the more being there is, or especially the more being there is, the more rigid it gets. In a way, solid things have more being, but less possibility, so to say. Yes, so thank you for the question. It was an elaborate answer, I guess, and we can maybe discuss it further.
Yeah, it's great. By the way,
I'd actually like to show you a film then.
If it's okay,
short film.
God, is it okay if I?
Because then we will also have the time to
if I state
discuss
something
more.
So it would be more convenient if we do it later.
I can't hear you.
Wow.
Your microphone is off.
God, it was fantastic. Just I was talking to to the nothingness as it is. So clear point. Is it okay if I'll that's fine. There was a technical thin point. If I restate some questions connected to this material and answer to some previous points just right now, would it be convenient?
Okay, I mean. We can go on with this, and then in between I can show the video, and then we can go on. Maybe like this, because now you have the text in mind.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, okay. So I'll start. There are some extra points on chat. Well, there are many of them, but I'm talking to an exact direction. Not inexact, but in a certain density we've chosen. I mean the 12th point and this explanation, this reasonable part of an independent sphere. So I'll start from the very beginning of the visionary context I've sort of constructed in my head. I got you. That's certainly interesting and I'd say catching as the reason why God is not in a God. So we are talking about the more, let's say, sporadic reasons that construct the sphere, and that's the God. So the concept of mysterious, of something that is mysterious, and what is mysticism about actually, is naming the reason why we are naming something. So the model of the very first boundary we are facing by talking on anything is demolished in a good way as we face the real, let's say, essence and the context, individual context of a point we're talking about or just naming. So the model of the boundaries of God are ruined in mysticism rather than in orthodox, approach, generally speaking. And I support this, fully support. I guess that's also connected to the question we've discussed earlier. Well, not discussed, but you've mentioned, and I have lots of points to elaborate on further. I'm doing it, taking some notes for further discoveries, besides the very first reason of taking them into account. So back to the topic. That's really connected to the question of counterculture. I wanted to answer to this also. I think I'll do it now.
And I hope you're not alone. in answering this.
No, sure not. I have, I have several sub personalities in myself, so it's okay. They're helping me with this stuff every time, even when I don't want them to. And then I'll go back to the chat and back to the 12th point, straightly. So I guess mysterious approach when the boundaries are ruined, and we are talking about the process that constructs the exact essence, and the exact essence is not formed, and is not unformed state, is unformed for the reason of the ability to act, and that is God. The counterculture, especially our case of using it, I mean the term, is very specific and even tricky. Like every word has its own status. What is, convenient, relatable, and so on. But counterculture is what we call in Russian zashkvar, or cringe, just cringe. It's a complicated thing to name something counterculture in a globalized world, and in a sphere, in a time, in an era, even when the counterculture has left us because of the massive explosion of different formations we can probably produce from different parts of us. But still, I guess it's a correct term because, well, I'll read the notes I've taken, I guess. Not to forget everything I want to name. Well, the counterculture is the word that lessens its spirit of relatableness. I mean, the usage of it just now marks the certain form of reflection. That captures the vision with no actual, I'd say, stabilized source for several recalls. The process of recalling anything or just thinking about anything that are always, or just generally speaking, are often, in other cases, very stabilized and constructed. So, the main point is the usage of this specific term just now marks the alternative source of naming the basic relations within our action that is not actually a sphere. And this combination, of the absence of a status, the historical meaning, and the basic position, all of these markers makes the counterculture as a term very productive for, I guess, calling for and to the reasons of producing the being besides the, unlimited but still existing boundaries and standards to marking the basic ability of being stated. So, metaphorically speaking, I'd say, so it's a reasonable case to criticize this term, but if we are talking about the personalized ways to to use it as a starting point for naming something besides it, it reforms and reframes the position we could probably take, even with the, with the, I'd say, chosen absence. Yeah, chosen by us, actually, absence in spheristic modalities. Yeah, that's about counterculture, and also mysticism. It's pretty the same. I mean, the way we use these terms, as it is consisted from the ways we are, and these ways actually reframes the thought we see as a holistic one. So, it's an interesting thing, and the culture of encountering rather than counterculture. I love it. I love it, and I guess that's the way we are now. If we want to, construct the being itself with no markers and preferable. Yeah, God. Okay. Yeah. Okay, I'd say I'd leave it like that. Just preferable, or just any preferences. Yeah, preferences for another inner material, maybe inner material that makes us certain in our being. But actually, the way we choose is another one. It's you know. It's encountering the new touch of how the operations besides ourselves can be presented, and how this presentation outside of us can be the new source for being with no direction of lessening us. Yeah, and that's the way. Let's say that's a good thing. And in these terms, it seems like God is also a relation. So it's a relation hiding the local modalities, local links in an orthodox way. But if we face God as a relation, it really becomes, I'd say it again, a point that provokes the ruined vision of the ability to restate maybe ourselves with no maybe stabilized matter within us. Yeah, that's something from me. Just a few points. I have not forgotten, but I've forgotten anything anyway. So you can, comment on this, and I can go back to the chat, or you can continue, and then I'll
can
come back to the chat.
It's enough inspiration to comment on it. So, first of all, I guess it's also clear for you that that I actually also like the term counterculture. I simply cannot stand the general attitude of the mainstream of our time to be so critical about it, right? And in this sense, there's also a certain complicity then between us and the time before. But I also understand your idea of to have a sort of a non-relation, can also be understood in terms of no, this is not necessarily related to the 60s. This is maybe also a general approach. This can also be related to the future, or to whatever happening in I don't know. I'd say when Buddhism came up in India, so to say, it was also a counterculture movement, right? And this counter always has this idea of a relation, while also the encounter indeed is also a sort of relation. So I think that the encounter and the counter, they can really add up to each other. One idea you're relating, or my relating, of counterculture to mysticism is, of course, that there's exactly in the terminology of orthodoxy. Orthodoxy is, in a sense, it's the mainstream, the main culture, so to say. And the mysticism, you can also understand. You can also call it paradox, actually. So this makes the counter aspect more clear. That you have the orthodox. There's also the term heterodox, more common term, which is very much used in India, the so-called heterodox schools of philosophy, they're different, right? Hetero. The paradox is even weirder because somehow it's different, but at the same, it's a kind of a guerrilla, right? It's trying to implode the system rather than attacking it from outside. So I think this would also be a very, very interesting meeting. But maybe to go a step further, I'm not sure about the utterly relational character you mentioned. That God is only relational. First of all, of course, when I say God, it's I do it in a very philosophical way, right? There's also philosopher Spinoza who talks about God all the time, and everyone called him an atheist back then, right? And even nowadays. But in a way, I'm also trying to go one step further, I think, than the general idea in contemporary philosophy that everything is relational, that somehow, I follow this step that difference in relation to identity is primordial, so relation is primordial in relation to things, so to say. But I would go, I think, even one step further with this idea of the encounter. Of course, the encounter is a relation, and it's an encounter with the weird, okay? And the weird is only weird in relation to the normal, so on. But at the same time, while encountering the weird or the strange, so-called God or chaos, we're also entering something which is not a relation anymore. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's a context, as you could say in Japanese philosophy, or a place, right? So it's or a field, which basically makes even relations possible. So you would start with the ontologically the highest realm, or actually the lowest realm, the base is not the relation, but the place which makes the relation possible. Mm-hmm. From the place can the relations come, and from these relations come these little entities we call things and human beings, right?
Exact. Individual that stuff. Yeah.
But this is not sure. I mean, that's the direction I want to go.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I'll concretize, I guess, my point about the relation. I meant that, I'll elaborate just more concretely, just right now. I mean, the God for me is a relation, but it's not the holistic experience. So it's different from the general trend of contemporary philosophy that you want to.
the general trend of immanence.
Yeah. I guess I'm talking about the step further too. That's the way. Just conceal some events and some experiences with no ending on them. Therefore, I meant, maybe that's the close vector, but it can be the other direction. Besides, that's the one vector. Like God is relation, but the general holistic experience of being is a source for a system. So the God can be because of the of the cancellation sort of absence in him. So the structure can be seen as a function that reduces the stress between the differences, and this reduction makes possible to form the, let's say, to form the form, actually, or construct the form to be less tautological, and the holistic experience can be opposite, even opposite to the naming aspects, as I'm always facing the problem, such an issue, let's say, like when we are talking about something, we are talking about the thing that has already gained its power, and it has gained its status, not in a social way, but it's the consequence, logical one. So yeah, it already has its place and position, but maybe the phenomenon of acting and producing is I'd say it again is a certain distance between the source that is considered to be the main one, and it's a function, and the another point of the reason why the stressing of attention can be real. So that's a certain, not a dual structure, but a delusion of dual structure for making the possibilities maybe stated. Like the phenomenon is something that we also not see or do not consider, but restate from the scratch. Therefore, it's important. That's an important concept for me. I mean, construction in actually the being in a process. So yeah, I agree that there is all about the place, but not the relation itself. But my point was the stressing point maybe of mine was naming the God is especially as a term, as a relation. That is not the holistic experience, and because of it not being the holistic sphere, maybe, and because of it not being formed, we can talk about it. Therefore, the way we presume and consider the palatable, I'd say, maybe. Matter, yeah, to be more general, is hidden in this extraction of God as a function. So that's the stress that makes possible the parts to be alive, and I really divide the living point, the living extraction, and the way and the source and the maybe result, the result we are talking to, and in this stress, maybe the action lives, and that's a problem for me. What is action? God, what is action? And that's the possible answer. Yeah, you can comment on this, or we can, choose another structure of our further being. It's possibilities are ours.
Well, I can just say that it seems we are very close to the matter, because we're already getting very much into the mad kind of philosopher's talk, and
yeah, that is.
the concepts are just flying around. So
My man's
it's in a way also what I wanted to say. Right?
Talk, actually. Like what do you do for a living? Mad philosopher talk.
Just a simple point, maybe for everyone to understand. Is that I totally agree with your term of the holistic, and that we are at the same time also at the point to understand it in a different way than it was understood in the past. It's really a holistic, which is not about the system or concept anymore, which tries to contain everything, and that's why it's always reducing. And I think this makes particular sense when we're talking about structure, especially that's the whole point of chaos, that it doesn't have any structure, right? It's undetermined, and that's why it's also, who knows? What can you say about it, right? You say it's a relation. No, it's not. It's not a relation. You say even when you say it's not a relation, it's wrong again, right? And that's this is what I wanted to indicate with negative quality. In the end, it's like what they say in mostly Buddhist philosophy, neti neti. This means neither nor. It's whatever you say, no.
Yeah, you know, that's me in a nutshell. You've described all my career. Neither nor, but you know, it's a great status. Not anybody has it, but we do, so it's a good thing, I guess, to share with. Also, you know, returning just for further expression on the point you've elaborated on, I guess it was really, let's say, just necessary, yeah. I'll choose these words, but there is a source for making it. Yeah. No, it's directly. That's the first time when it is directly. It was really necessary. Yeah. Besides the alternative visionary contradictions that are hidden in it, I'd say. I'd put it this way. So yeah, coming back a bit to counterculture as a strengthens possibility for viewing the principles of contradiction, actually. Maybe counterculture, as well as the approach to a personalized ontology, to be more generalized in our talk, is a marker to express the visionary and the vision itself. Therefore, it can be, not a ruined case, but actually the, a tool, yes, a sort of tool for restating the abilities with no stabilized, maybe start, yeah. And the start and the absolute as something that is presented in a moment, and therefore it can maybe lead to being, I guess, is a very crucial thing. And nobody, or at least nobody, is not very used to it. Like, it's easier to pronounce absolute when you're pronouncing absolute, but the source is in a moment. Therefore, it can be spreaded, principally spreaded. Yeah, that sort of stuff. Love it. Yeah, what do you think on the absolute in this case and in this context directly?
Yeah, now we're so much into metaphysics, right? I really understand this term counter as a negation, right? As a sort of negation, and there are different kinds of negation.
Exactly.
They're the kind of negations which contradict. The oppositions, they lead to contradictions, and then it may lead up higher, or it will just the tension will be maintained, for example. But there are also the kind of oppositions. Maybe this is the kind of opposition, the the counter in counterculture, that it goes more in a it's not symmetrical, right? And that's why it goes more in a zigzag. In terms of the absolute, you can say, I mean, the absolute is always supposed to be something more or less independent, and the counter in counterculture somehow seems to need a main culture, right? Which it counters, right? And this is first of all very interesting because it's very much it's very disorientating, right?
Yeah.
Also the idea of the weird is very disorienting because the counterculture and the weird, they are how do you say it? They are deictic. It's like a this or that, right? It's like a he or she. It only works within a specific context, right? And I think there are two ways to deal also with the terminology of the absolute here, which, first of all, people shouldn't be shocked when we're talking about the absolute, and we thought it was something of the past, right? You can also like the term God, you can also take the term absolute and as something non-relational, for example, something which is independent, and so on. One idea is a sort of an absolute movement, absolute relation, which really lies in the counter itself. So this would also be the nitty again, right? That you negate whatever it is. This would be the very dialectical understanding of counterculture, which doesn't really have a goal, right? This must be a sort of dialectics without a telos, without teleology. But practically speaking, we can then ask ourselves, yeah, well, what happens when there's no more main culture, right?
Yeah, and that's the case. Like the counterculture is not alone. It's the counterculture philosophy, and the main word is here philosophy. Therefore, the counter, this part, really lessens its it's a dictionary additional meaning, actually. Like there is a main culture and there is a counterculture for it, or just it's a process of negation that is stated. We've been talking on the links and relations connected to God and the different ontological structures that makes God as a term possible, even in our usage, just in our usage, with no, with no other steps yet. We'll come back to this. So if we take in links into account again as a question and as a source for naming alternatives, I'd say several points on it. First of all, I take the holistic visionary of counterculture philosophy, where the link between counterculture and philosophy limitates the meaning of a counterculture counterpart. So the combination of these actually elements makes the result the only thing that makes sense. I mean the contradiction to a strict naming tradition. Like counterculture means there is a culture that is the main, and there's this relation is very stabilized and therefore already ruined, as it is not a producing point. But for me, the source for actually new world making, as we were talking about recently, is in this personalized link that is playing with the naming as something given. So the point is rather deep. It is about the personalized link between the parts of a holistic, given essence. For maybe making the parts more separated from each other, and for restating the possible results of a certain behavior. The theory of the links, like, and there is A and it leads to B. I guess it's good if we state the relation at the first point, and because of it being not the consequence, but the first point, it leads to better results. Better in terms of varieties, in terms of creation that reframes the stabilized material. I'll put it this way. So that's a deep topic, a really deep one. Another one, yeah. And
I would have a question, or shall we go on the
guess,
chat? Or
I guess we can. You can, continue. Then I'll come back to the chat and read the questions from viewers. As they're waiting, there are lots of questions. Yeah. You're free to ask them now again and so on. I'm talking to our dear audience.
Maybe we come to a couple of questions now.
Yeah, sure.
Because then afterwards I will go in a different relation, in a different direction again.
Yeah, it's very possible. So, okay. So I'll start from the very beginning, I guess. Well, Hannes, have you had some actual mystical experience, like presence of something extraterrestrial in your consciousness, or maybe some extrasensory insights?
I think it's when you live a very artistic life and you travel a lot, especially when it's very hot. I love India because it's always like 40 degrees and very thick air, right? For me, it's impossible to not have a lot of out-of-body experiences and all these kind of things. And in a way, when you had a couple of them, you also learn to have them when you're sober, so to say, right? So it's I believe that every kind of poet has a lot of this kind of mind-blowing experiences, such as also as how to pronounce it in English, synesthesia, mixing up
synesthesia,
sound and words, for example. This is, for me, it's more a matter of degrees. So also at the moment, right, I'm saying a couple of words, some images come to your mind. You can always, when you push yourself on simply mentally, sometimes through imagination on a different level, they just flourish. It's incredible. I think that the creativity in this sense is really infinite. One of the few things which are really infinite, and I would really stop, especially in this mystical discourse, I would really stop making these experiences as so extremely special or out of the world kind of meeting with God. You're meeting with God, but it's like I got dizzy, right? Sometimes when you're dizzy, you're also in a way meeting. You're encountering chaos because you're also encountering your own finitude. But then, yes, mainly I want to point out that I would really stop thinking this way. Did you have a mystical experience, right? Because it's a very dichotomy. I think kids have mystical experiences non-stop.
I got it. Good point about, the changing, change the, they changed the way to get the term of mysterious. Yeah, like it's given because of certain, operation that's not given. Again, that's a link to the same problematic we've already, a bit tried to elaborate on. Like, okay, there is such an operation, like, for example, just sensing or engaging in something or making the contrasts, but there is no given maybe modality for this. Like there is no given way to produce contrast, and therefore the things I stated with the link to counterculture problem are useful. They are talking about the operation that has no criteria. The same here. So that's a sort of maybe that's an angle we are producing for making the not the boundaries but the essence possible. So yeah, great answer. So the next question. How is mysticism reflected in the tendencies of the political thought and political science?
Not much, right? I mean, especially from Marxism, always comes the tendency that there's the general argumentation. The most important is to free the dialectics from its mystical tradition, right? The mystical is always the weird and the confusing. But in terms of Marxism, it is clear that the mystical is always which comes from above. The mystical is always something which some dogmatic priest tells you about. The mystical is this fetish of capital, all these kind of things, and with all this, I would agree, right? That's the kind of confusion we have to get rid of. But in other terms, actually, there's nothing really mystical about that. Let's take the example of the priest, right? James Joyce in the book on the, how's it called? The life of the artist as a young man. There's the priest talking for a whole chapter, making everyone so afraid of hell. Right? There's this huge imagination of this hell, and if you have sex before wedding or something, you will go there, and then these detailed, extremely detailed descriptions, right? And then you always say, yeah, but who knows? It's like this mystical, we call this also mystical. Who knows? And then the priest says, ha ha ha, you will see, right? You will see in the end. It's your problem, right? And this is the fake mysticism. This is not mystical. It's simply extreme dogmatism, kind of dogmatically providing a border between what you know and what the priest knows and what is knowable. My understanding of mysticism is that there's not something behind this myth, basically. There's not. When the priest says, yeah, you will see, there's really no, it's unknowable, and that's the point, that no one can come up and tell you actually this will happen, if, like raising very big words about morality and so on. And in this sense, you can start off with the sort of political dimension of mysticism, especially I think in terms of the weird with which I've started, because it also has a certain exoticism, talking about the weird. Somehow it's I also feel a bit uncomfortable with it, to say the weird, although it's fun, right? But in dealing with what we ourselves find weird, in encountering it, we're also getting whatever it is. At some point, it becomes also normal for us. So something we found very weird becomes part of our own subjectivity. And in these terms, you can talk about, especially about different forms of sexuality and different genders,
and queer theory.
About the strangers coming from elsewhere, and people are not encountering anyone. You just say they're weird, and when you get to know them, right, then they're us, then I am them, and so on. So you're in this way, you're calming down, right? And I think that mysticism as a philosophy of life, especially, and the art of mysticism, really makes people slowly also on, maybe even on a more or less mainstream level, more aware that the strange is not only the strange, that it actually, for some people like me, it's something, first of all, something great, and then at some point simply something normal, right? Every day, and there's not a big deal about differences.
Yeah, I truly support the point you elaborated on, as sometimes I really have, that's another topic, but a very strong need to to talk like a stereotypical Russian, for reframing my integration into the context that is unlimited and therefore it's present. So I'll do it right now. I really want to say it like this sometimes. Some production of alternative Russian mafia in my head. That was a point that I've left. So continue in a normal way. That's the weird is not weird anymore when you face it. Maybe encountering the weird is the problem that's really constructionist, and is potentially constructive because of the because of the just creation of possibility of acceptance. That's the first part of it. So when you encounter it, it's not weird anymore. It can be yours. But I guess it's a very important point to save the right to stay weird, even with the before and after, no matter what the encounter has felt and has was completed, as the weird can be yours. That's alternative inner maybe regimes of ourselves. Like we are stating ourselves in a certain modality that is not given, and therefore the mixture of acceptance and alternativeness is possible. Even it's more possible than an abstract normality and so on, and obviosity, because the obviosity does not present the visionary links of different parts that are normal, actually normal, or just more widespread than the absence of them. Yeah, so that's a good point.
Just a quick comment on that. I'm having I have more problems with terminology. I mean, I totally understand what you say, and I think it in the same way. Keep the weird also weird, right? It's simply the words start disappearing, right? Because the meaning of the normal shifts in a way. It's also the weird thing about general society is to consider the normal as good, for example. But what am I saying? Like, how can I understand the normal without relation to the weird? And I'm not sure, maybe we need a third term to to say it. Or maybe it's understood anyways. But that's just a side comment.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, I'll continue. There are several questions left. Well, not several, but a certain amount of, I'd say. And yeah, I agree that the point, maybe the reason for me, if I'm stating side comments on this from my side, there actually, normality is a certain status, a certain state that reflects a lot of inner material. And we're talking about states, and not United States, but just states, like conditions and parts of differentiated varieties. And when we're talking or using terms in this way, we reflect the actual sense of producing the meaning we wanted to in variable meanings. Yeah, that's just comment in terms of elaboration. So yeah, the next one, it's about where was it? Yeah, I see it. About atheism actually. Is atheism universal, or it's a part of European culture and cultural expansion? Can there be non-European atheism?
Good one. Thank you. I've been reading the geophilosophy of Deleuze and Guattari. It's a chapter in their final book called "What is Philosophy?" And I always like this chapter a lot, but I start finding it terrible. Maybe I read too much post-colonial theory. And in this book, there's really also this question made. One aspect is that they literally talk about atheism and not about unbelief, to make it a bit more general. And then they ask the question, can there be a philosophy which is not atheist? What of course implies a lot. That in a sense, all philosophy, to become real philosophy, it has to be atheist. And then you can start asking yourself, well, what do we mean when we say atheism? And I think in general, it's if you take the term, it's very, very extremely limited term. Right? It's really a term which only applies to European history, and not even to that. Basically, to European history since 17th century, something like that. Then it came up this idea that there can also, since they're theists, so there can also be this weird kind of person called an atheist, right? And that's why it's terrible to speak of atheism in global terms, right? At least in this very thin definition of unbelief. Maybe unbelief is another interesting term we could also discuss about more. I mean, the greatest example is so obvious that this so-called Buddhism, right? What is Buddhism? It seems to be something like a religion, but it's also a multiplicity. That this so-called religion, Buddhism, is atheist, and it's still a religion, right? Or at least in the sense that, I mean, sometimes there are gods appearing, right? But they're only explanatory for the main point is the Buddha, and the Buddha is human, right? And this is so clear and obvious that talking about atheism on the global scale for sure doesn't make sense. I mean, if you like, we can go deeper into the topic.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll continue, but I'll remember it for being able to return to this point. We're free to continue our talk, even in alternative events. We can continue the topic as it's unlimited, as we've discovered. Actually, just in another stream again, or just in a continuous way, in a processing model. So, as some limits in a moment actually lead to more fulfilled reflection in general, and that's the source we're gaining. So yeah, thank you. And there is a certain additional point connected with the question that was asked above earlier. Can, for example, can the Marxism in Ethiopia be the European cultural colonialism because it tried to overthrow local Christian theocratic paradigm? Yeah. Interesting.
Okay, can you read it again? It's a tough one.
Yeah, sure. So, can the Marxism in Ethiopia be the European cultural colonialism because it tried to overthrow local Christian theocratic paradigm?
I don't know. I'm not sure if I know enough to answer this question properly, but I can try. Because I have no idea about Marxism in Ethiopia, obviously. I have an idea about Marxism in India again. I'm talking about India the whole day. When the first generation of westernized Indian scholars were very much affirmative to Western tendencies, such as Christianity, because it went against the system of caste. Then the second generation with Gandhi and especially Ambedkar was much more interesting, I think, than Gandhi. went very much against it. But Ambedkar was also a Marxist, that's for sure. So, why is Marxism European? Right? Why is Marxism German kind of philosophy? Because it's based on Hegel and another German kind of philosophy. Certainly there's a mode of thinking, and I imagine now Marxism in Ethiopia. There's always the problem that we are also colonized spiritually and mentally, and you can never know until which level this goes, right? So for sure it is a kind of colonialism. Yeah, for sure, because you never know until which level you are again influenced by this kind of thought, right? At the same time, Marxism is also revolutionary, and it's there. It's a sort of a counterculture, right? So at least on a certain level of history or culture, but it's not a linear history or something like that. There are different modes, and there are different situations, and in particular situations, something is happening there. Like in Russia, something was happening when Marxism came in, and much more was happening than in Germany, right? And then you ask yourself, is Marxism German or Russian, or actually it's Soviet, right? And also it is German. So I'd say both, right? Obviously.
Okay. Thank you. So there is a point that makes us come back to the topic of the 12th thesis. Especially there is a question: how did you come to that conclusion? I mean, the sort of differentiation between orthodoxy and mysticism, and the way they reflect the reality, in front of themselves.
How did they come to that? Yeah. Well,
yeah, and there is an additional thing to this question, like what that the difference between the orthodoxy and mysticism means in this divine case. Yeah, that's sort of a group of questions that are connected with this point, and also there is
yeah, okay. I mean, I can quickly answer.
So sure. Then
the
I'll
last one,
reflect
because
the alternative.
Because I think the first one, I've already spoken a lot about this thesis, and I have a whole paper almost ready. So the one asking the question,
I'm saying that the link is in every resource, so it's free for reading. So the person who can read this paper.
No, but I mean there's another paper which only deals with thesis number 12. So 12 pages only on thesis number 12. So the one asking for it, just contact me or have a look on the academia profile, and we'll find it there in a couple of months. I mean, that's for sure. What was the second quick question? How I relate the orthodoxy to and mysticism to this idea that
in a divine
God
way.
does not exist.
Yeah. What's the difference between them in this term? Yeah.
Of course, yeah. So orthodoxy is the kind of positive theology which understands God as the creator of the universe and all that, and therefore God necessarily exists. And the mystic differentiates the God from the Godhead, what they said in a thesis before. And the Godhead is always kind of hidden, right? The Godhead is only approachable through a negative theology, and if you push the negative theology to its extreme, even the existence disappears. And in this new kind of setting, then when you have the Godhead, and then you have the God, and then the world, right? Then the God which comes in would be sort of a pure creator. Actually, creation itself would be God. So again, relation, as we said,
I got it. So there is a point, that is sort of an answer, or at least conclusion, that is related to the 12th thesis as well. So I'll read it out loud. I think that this difference is not true, but is just has more difference in strangeness potentials than atheism and religion. I think this true difference is not absolute enough to be true. Yeah, that point. I can repeat it.
Okay. Well, let's first see which difference, right? The true difference doesn't lie between atheism and religion, but between orthodoxy and mysticism.
Yeah, that is.
Okay.
That is.
Okay, not related to the first part of thesis 12. Okay, can you read the question again, and then we can...
Sure. I think that this difference is not true, but it is just it has just more difference in strangeness potentials than atheism and religion. I think that true difference is not absolute enough to be true.
Yeah, what means true, right?
Yeah, and the way, it constructs the issue. I guess that's the question.
Yes. I mean, metaphysically speaking, we could go very deep into this. In understanding true, for example, in terms of the Greek aletheia, the true is something which is revealed. And when it's revealed, it would already, in a sense, leave from the absolute. If the absolute is hidden, it is definitely not true in this sense, right? So it can be revealed, and what is revealed is what we see, what we hear, and then we're entering the level of words, right? So I don't know, I didn't think about this point, that the true difference in relation to the other difference would be wrong or something. Well, the other difference for sure, to everyone, the other difference is the difference between atheism and religion. I mean, it's not a wrong difference. It's a limited difference, right? It is the point I was talking about before, that atheism is a European issue, and you cannot globalize it. So you could also say that the true differences means it's a difference which makes sense simply on the global scale. This would be two answers which can both go in different directions. But the final question was that is it not only more, how does it go? More helpful in terms of the weirdness and the encountering
in strangeness potentials than atheism and religion. Yeah.
Yes, of course. I mean, I mean, not only, right? But this is of course the main point, because you see, we are those people dealing with history and its and the history of culture a lot. We're used to a lot of things. It's really, atheism is not strange, right? Atheism is something really, really boring for me. I find nowadays I find some Anselm of Canterbury I was reading from the Middle European dark so-called Middle Ages. I find this guy very strange, actually. Once again, so it again goes in this weird kind of zigzag, just because I grew up with more or less atheist society. I find again the theism strange, but at the same time, it's also quite standard, right? It's very strange in relation to atheism, but it's also something you more or less expected, right? There's like a person really believing in this God in the more or less traditional sense, and that's why I think we have to go, of course, one step further and not getting stuck in this theism binary. So yes, for sure, it has more potential, and it's also not the final, right? I mean,
yeah, I got it. Thank you, great one. Yeah, like there is a maybe I'd say personally I think that the potential of the strangeness is an absolute for reflecting the not unified but a very concrete point, and a very concrete point is always the new one, because of its because of the place it's coming from. That's the
exactly.
intention, of the for the extraction, and for the absolute reframes itself. And because of this possibility, this very core possibility of being an actor, in case it is even a term, just a term, not somebody we consider to be an actor and agent and so on and so forth, it's an absolute, in a tangled way, like zigzag. So yeah. Okay, so we have several questions, like 3 or 4. Are you ready to answer them?
Sure, if you have the time.
So, is absurd logic is a higher order than mysticism?
Absurd logic.
Yeah.
Well, when you're talking about logic in the higher order, I guess you're coming from a more logical, analytical direction. In terms of mathematics, there's a higher order logic.
I guess yes. The context in the chat is like this in some terms.
Well, I think we have to discuss this afterwards, because first you would have to explain me again what is a higher order in these terms. I would, since this is a more dialectical kind of thinking, I would understand the higher order in a more Hegelian sense. You see that one dichotomy is getting more to the point than the other one, as we discussed before, the orthodox and the mystical goes further than the religious and the atheist. But more specifically on your question, I mean, absurdism is a minor cultural phenomenon. So it's very small. It's something which happened starting with Nietzsche in the 19th century in Germany, and then it was continued a little bit in France, right? It's a very small countries, very small range. Even within French culture, there's so much more going on. And I picked out this very small one. So absurdism is almost nothing in relation to the huge mystical traditions going over the whole world for, if you don't know, 20,000 years, you could say. But it has an element which pushes it further. Absurdism has an element which it has a specifically atheist element. And now using this term, right? It is needed, the term atheism, in the European context to spice the mysticism up, because otherwise we wouldn't stand. I could not stand. I cannot stand reading Meister Eckhart, even though I'm very much into his mode of thought. But it's so filled with all these terribly Christian terms. It just doesn't have any appeal to counterculture or counter philosophy or counterculture philosophy. So I think
criteria. I like it.
I also don't want to go into there's also the New Age discourse, but we don't want to go there anymore. I think we really want to be something like atheists, but not limited in this European sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the point. That exactly the absurdism gives a push to mysticism, which was more or less in a dreamlike state before absurdism came up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's a good time now to really go through the also very old mystical traditions again and bring them up.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. And there were just 2 questions left in chat. After that, you can, continue in a way you want to continue. So, in different regimes that in an abstract probability for being expressed and so on. So ask him about Dasein, how he understands it is it in a German, and how he would translate it into English. That's our regular question, like how do you get Dasein, and finally we have somebody who really can get Dasein.
And then you will make a catalog with it, all the different answers.
That's an idea, but we have it, in our minds. But maybe that's the time to make it written. So you can, untangle the mystery for us now.
No, well, that's not a mystery, right? It's just a matter of first of all, a matter of knowing the language, and then a matter of having read Heidegger until you get dizzy. Right? Etymology, da and sein, right? Sein is being, but it's a verb. That's why in English they say being, which seems a bit like a verb.
By the way, is it possible to translate it like in being?
What? Dasein?
Yeah.
I mean, the second part, or the first part of the word Dasein is da, and da is not in, da is there, or here, I would say. I think the here makes more sense.
Being here.
You know, you can say da when you say when you point at something. Da, look. Da.
In Russian it is
but you can also,
yeah.
But you can also say, are you here in the talk? Is the speaker here? And then I say, yeah, da. I'm here.
I got it.
And I think it's more in this kind of understanding, because we're talking about being in the world, for example, and this is this in should be understood in terms of being, maybe presence is not a bad understanding. So the Dasein, I mean, it's a sort of person, but it's a verb, right?
So it's an individual being here, in a spread way, in a spread meaning.
I mean, Heidegger always protested against this nomination that Dasein would be a person, actually.
Yeah, but if we stress on the I'd say a toy explanation just for finding the exact relation with the potential of neglecting it and getting the vector that was expressed by Heidegger with the usage of the word, with the lessening its strength. So that's the first point, just knowing the language as you do, for combining some elements for results. Therefore our dearest viewer is asking this thing. Yeah.
I mean, to get a definition of it, you would have to use all the other terms that Heidegger used. You would have to relate it. You cannot understand it if you don't relate it to the other terms around. So I would have to give a whole Heidegger lecture to explain the term Dasein. So I think this is enough.
Yeah, that's enough for the way the question was stated. Definitely, like not the whole potential of a term, so not the essence, but the pointing methods. Yeah, I'd put it this way, like the meanings we're talking about or we're simply using are only preferences, I guess, we use for furthering interaction in between the results. So the first point was explained pretty well, as you did. So yeah, the second is the processing way of neglecting the position of a source. I'm talking pretty often about the source, but that is about the position of it, and that is the place where all the new and the differentiations in general are hiding or just being present. So yeah, thank you. That was straight to the point of the concept of explanation in general. And the last question we have here, it's related to the main topic of our event. Can we talk about the dichotomy being and nothing within the framework of absurdity? Yeah.
The chaos is the unity of being and nothing. It's neither being nor nothing, and it's also both at the same time. I think this is the this famous unity of being and nothing in the beginning of Hegel. It turns into being and nothing are the same, and that's why it turns into becoming. Chaos is posited on the other side. It's actually it is before the dichotomy even of being and nothing. But it's interesting if we talk about also the negativity involved with thinking about the weird, right? Encountering the weird. Because what's happening is that we're actually so close in ourselves. We're so close in so many layers and layers. That's why in the description I was also mentioning our onion bodies. We are in so many layers and layers and layers and layers and layers, in so many cultural patterns and all that. And in this way, we also tend to understand an opening of this. We tend to understand it as something negative. It's a rupture, right? It's a rupture. It's a sort of nothing, and then everyone is afraid of this nothing, and that's the main problem of the mainstream, that this is considered as a nothing, and that this nothing is something you have to be afraid of and all that. And from this comes the idea that whatever weird is bad, right, and the normal is good. But it's also not a nothing, right? It's actually only nothing, the nothingness of all these layers around us. We're only getting rid of the prison we're built in. And we call it nothing, right? It's not. We got rid of the nothing. So the encounter with the weird is actually the only real encounter, which is an encounter with the, well, not with the something, right? It's something which goes beyond the dichotomy.
Okay, I got it. And well, we have several variants. I say there is the last question appeared, and then you can, we're, if we are sort of in a way of being directed by the way we construct the general census and strengthenings, I'd say we have come to an end, but you have not fully presented everything you wanted, so you can do it in a more focused way, but still do this if you want. And also I can express the last question that is pretty fundamental, direct into the topic.
It's not a question.
Yes, every question, but still, it is one. You'll get to know why when I pronounce it. Why is mysticism true?
It's a very short one. Yeah. That's why you call it big.
Unusual for us.
And it was a new question, right? But because you see, I already mentioned the shifting terminologies of the term true already, and I wonder if this is reflected in the question. This would be by the mystical, right, the hidden. Why did it? Or is it manifest? Is the hidden manifest? And you look around. It's everything is very, very manifest. You see everything, right? So maybe this also brings us back to my very beginning of my weird experience, and this idea that we don't have to prove it in the final instance, because it's all there, because there's the literal proof for it, whatever is there to prove. I'm not even arguing for existence, right? It's all here. So this is the truth of the mystical is exactly the obvious, right? The appearance we're encountering every day. Oh, this is if I go further, it's a tough question. I have to think about it because I don't know if I argue that mysticism is the true doctrine. I said in the beginning that I figured out that I'm not looking for truth in philosophy. I'm always looking for the trippy, for the weird. You can also formulate it in this way: that the weird almost replaces the idea of truth in philosophy, or that the weird or the mystical becomes the new truth, so to say.
Yeah,
and this is something.
it's very close to the topic that the world's order reigns because of this action. So yeah, I got it. Yeah, continue, please. Sorry.
I mean, in a way, yeah. I mean, it's here the most revolutionary theory of truth you can basically have. Is that the truth itself, what is true, is always that which is not the given, right? Which is not the status quo. All the established paradigms, all the laws we're living in, whatever is considered as correct, right? You can also oppose correct to truth. Whatever is correct is exactly not true. This is exactly the onion body. This is exactly the spiritual colonization we're all stuck in. Exactly this belief that always the correct, the already established is true. What even involves the general understanding of standpoints, that we all have to have standpoints. That's why I was a bit stuck in this question, because I wouldn't claim this as my standpoint, that the mystical is true. It's rather a movement. It's a direction, right?
Yeah. Maybe that's the abyss of our insignificance. Therefore, we reframe the results in terms of the general direction they produce within themselves. So yeah, I got it. Yeah. We're thinking and doing stuff at a staggering rate. So we've thought of, sort of actually, restated the structure that is obliged to be in events, and therefore I'd say made the holistic very pointed itself. That is a great achievement. So yeah, I guess we can watch the film you wanted to show, and being in a sort of a vector of focusing on an end, as the intensity we're being in is still needed to overdue and overcome by our viewers and the viewers that will watch us later, actually. So yeah, thank you for such staggering, also, and enormously concretized answers. It's it's a luck. It's a great luck to deal with a person who really pays attention to the point of reframing the being in the very concrete essences and in very, very own essences. So that's a pleasure. That's one of the pleasures I'll name further, and I've named before. Still, I could not miss it. So yeah, you can show the video if you want, or we can plan.
Okay, if you're up for it. I mean, actually, we wanted to finish
Yeah,
for
okay.
20 minutes ago. I don't mind.
Yeah, I guess if it's possible to finish, so if the structure was not, truly demolished, it's okay to finish. Yeah. Yeah, I was, just answering asking for the varieties that are preferable for you for stating the results of yours. So yeah, we can finish here. So, dear friends.
Up to you, whatever you like. I mean,
I can. I guess we can plan the second part maybe. That will has some link to the cases we've discussed today and still reframe the alternative. What do you think?
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, it's a good plan. Well, dear friends, thank you for watching. It was a really great time, and we are sure you had a great time, dear friends, as I really did. We really did. We've covered lots of questions of the hidden, let's say, hidden strain of the enormous self part of an absolute. So, I'd say great thank you to you, Hannes. It was a pleasure. And I hope to communicate with you, in further aspects and in further contexts. Hope you enjoyed too.
Well, thank you for this weird encounter. We've never met in person.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess we'll continue. We'll plan the second part and all the stuff that is related to revolutionary, new, absoluticized matters of being. So
we won't be planning it. We will have to improvise.
Yeah.
Referring to the very first
we'll
question,
complete the being.
it can only be spontaneous.
Yeah, that's it. As we already did. So really, thank you very much. It was great. So I'll finish the translation. Dear friends, join our club, our events, and just stay tuned. The matter revolution is coming.